My name is Berenice Pan. We're here today with As the Experts and re-engaging parents and students in this new coming year. And our speaker today is Chief Segura from Family and Community Engagement. So welcome, Chief. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself to the people that are on the call.
Perfect. So Adrian Segura, born and raised in Chicago. I grew up in Westtown and Humboldt Park. I went to CPS for elementary school and for high school, and have been working in education for the last 15 years. And the last decade, I've been working in engagement. I started working in community engagement as a community organizer, working directly with parents, going door to door on a variety of different issues that were education and policy related. A lot of the work that I've done over the last 6 years has been helping connect our policymaking institutions. So the state, the city, CPS, the board, connecting families and students who are most impacted by decisions that are made to make sure that those perspectives are at the table and represented. And so I'm really excited that I'm able to do that work here today in this current role. And what we're going to talk about from an engagement perspective is, the overall makeup of the team, some of the work that we've done over the last year, and kind of directionally where we're heading. But really excited to be here. When I'm not working, I live in Humboldt Park with my wife and daughter. I have a 4-year-old who keeps me very busy. And we're soon to be CPS parents as well. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chief. Appreciate that. So I think you have co-hosting rights. So if you want to share your screen whenever you're ready. And to the people that are joining us, we're going to do, Chief's going to give us a brief presentation overall of engagement, what CPS is doing. And then as we're going through the presentation, if you have any questions, please use the chat to send us your questions. And then we'll actually go into a conversation with some of the questions that you might have. So take it away, Chief.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And it's the slide deck, right?
Yes.
All right. Perfect. So it's a brief presentation. I think a lot of the stuff we can probably breeze by, but it's important for parents and those who watch afterwards the recorded session to know what I'm presenting to you all today. I presented to CPS executive leadership some months ago, and to all the academic chiefs. So the chiefs that work in networks, the chiefs that work in education, teaching and learning, Office of Network Support, Office of Diverse Learners. They've all gone through this. I had them go through this introduction for FACE, because I think people don't realize, one, how large our team is, and then two, how broad it is in terms of the supports that we offer families and stakeholders in the community. So brief introduction to FACE. We'll talk about the elevated framework, which is the framework that we use as a department and as a district for how we define engagement, improving organizational alignment. So connecting the dots for folks that they understand how, we've got a framework, and now what does that mean in terms of helping connect the district into the community and improving that alignment. And then I think Bede has some questions that folks might have submitted in advance, and happy to also take questions that people might have as they come in. So FACE is a pretty diverse portfolio. It includes Title I supports. We have a Title I office that helps with compliance, faith-based engagement, and crisis management. FACE managers, when I created this presentation, now FACE specialists, but same function. It's our network support staff, local school councils, volunteers. So if you're a parent who's a CPS volunteer, you'd likely go through our team to get processed. Right now, for example, our volunteers team is taking all level 1 volunteers vaccination information as we get close to the October 15th deadline. So volunteers processing. Parent University, I would add a line there. A new initiative that we've launched this summer is programs, which is the work that Berenice is leading. Community action councils, and strategic initiatives. So this portfolio allows us to do a lot of different things. Right now, when I drafted this, we had 50, we're closer to 71 total staff members who help our district connect directly with families for a variety of different issues, crises, but then also proactive kind of core values, mission-driven type of work that we're trying to get done. So I'll go through a high-level overview of each department and the point of contact there as well, so that if folks do have questions that come up for them, you've got the people who are actually running this work. So Title I compliance and Title I spending in particular is the work that we do. There's two offices that oversee Title I. There's one directly in budget, and they're the ones that manage the Title I grant. So all the millions of dollars that come to the district for Title I supports go through budget and specifically grants. And then we manage the parent involvement funds that come out of there. So 1% of all Title I dollars are allocated towards parental involvement. You can imagine for a school that has maybe 100 students that are Title I eligible, it might not be a ton of money. But then for schools that have, like 800 or 1,000 students who are Title I eligible, it's actually pretty significant amount of money that can be used for parental involvement. So our team helps schools, one, getting compliance with that, but then two, also supports them with spending that money so that they're engaging with parents on a regular basis. And, so our team directly supports schools with the use of those dollars. And FACE also is able to use those dollars to put programs like this one together to run different workshops across the city. Our faith-based teams, we have an Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, and they've got kind of three marquee programs. Safe Haven, which we have 45 Safe Haven sites across the city. They offer a safe place for students to go to after school. Adopt a School, which is an initiative that we started under Dr. Jackson, where it's formalizing partnerships that already exist. So many faith institutions already partner with their local schools, either through space, through mentorship, through partnership. And so Adopt a School formalizes that partnership so that one, we can keep track of it and help sustain it and help build on it, but then also replicate it in other parts of the city where there's an opportunity. And then the third, in feeding people in need, like that's part of what we do. But the third is really crisis response. So Chicago unfortunately has seen an uptick in violence, and our students are not absolved of that. And so when there is a death in a school, our faith-based team is deployed out to support families directly, support them with counseling, with grieving, but then also in instances where there's a need, support them financially with funeral arrangements when it's needed. And then afterwards, they also annually host a luncheon called the Legacy of Love. So for those families who have lost students throughout the year, at the end of the year, we're able to convene that group and bring them together so that they can find community within each other, but also to honor the lives of their students who would be CPS graduates. And so we're going into our 5th year of hosting the Legacy of Love. And it's interesting. Families who have gone through it before often come back to help coach and mentor existing families who just lost a loved one this year. And so it's a beautiful thing to see that community come together and wrap themselves around each other. So that's our faith-based team that does a lot of that work. And it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that is behind the scenes on purpose. We're not trying to really go out there and kind of rally, here's what we're doing. It's really a service mindset. And then we've got our FACE managers or FACE specialists who are the connectors between CPS, our key priorities, and our stakeholders. And so, they do a lot of parent relationship management. They have parent collaboratives, PAC PLNs, parent university management. So many of our parent university sites are within networks, and our FACE specialists help oversee those sites. and find and bring different partners to the table. I know Berenice, when she was a faith specialist in Logandale, did a lot of support with bringing different partners to run programs for families. And, different sites have very similar setup. I know Michelle Clark has really robust programs and partnerships, as does Perez and some of our other sites across the city. And so our faith specialists really do help serve as the connectors with bringing resources directly for families. Local school councils fall under our portfolio, and this is a big one. We have, over 6,000 elected members across the city of Chicago who help approve budgets, select principals, retain principals, evaluate principals. And so there's a lot of relationship management that goes into our local school council work. There's also a lot of policy work. Local school councils are mandated by the state. And so we just celebrated our 30th anniversary of local school councils recently. And they're public making bodies. They're public boards who are required to, follow certain laws that are dictated by the state. And it's our job as a department to help support those council members with issues that may arise, but then also with ensuring that they have a deep understanding of what their roles are as elected members who represent their school communities. We have LSC elections coming up again this year. If you're interested in running and you're listening, April 2022 is when we run elections. And so you should be getting some information. You should start to hear more information about running for LSC in the weeks and months ahead. Volunteers unit. Our volunteers unit is they're unsung heroes, but if you're a CPS parent, a parent mentor, or volunteer in your child's classroom or in the lunchroom, or with greeting duties, you have probably gone through our volunteer processing unit. And we manage the volunteer processing for level 1 volunteers who undergo full level 1 fingerprint background checks, but also our volunteer level 2s who are, if you're a parent, you can volunteer in your school up to 10 hours a week as a level 2 volunteer. And if you're a community member, you can volunteer in a CPS school for up to 5 hours. Level 2 volunteers do have to be within line of sight of a CPS employee at all times. And that's the biggest difference. Level 1 volunteers can be a bit more, they can be a bit more autonomous and, support schools in different ways versus level 2. And we also support Title IX partnership in partnership with our Title IX office, which is Cami Pratt's office. Parent programming and development. So there's our parent university work. And so the way I view our parent university work, it's actually establishing parent university sites and helping run the operations, the logistics, the furnishing, making them welcoming spaces for families. And then there's the programmatic work that helps keep people coming back, but then also connects real programs that benefit families. And so for parent university operation stuff or helping create roundtables and focus groups and sessions, Pam Price is our director of parent university, and she's led a lot of that work and continues to lead a lot of that work. For programs, we identified a need early on where programming across different sites isn't equitable. And there's a real need to have someone who's really thinking about bringing the high quality programs across all sites for families. That's partnerships with city colleges, partnerships with larger organizations or smaller organizations, bringing and identifying marquee programs that parents actually care about, and then finding out how do we resource it, how do we finance it if we need to pay for it. And so Berenice was brought on in May, I want to say more around May, June, to help us oversee our programmatic offerings. And, Ask the Expert was one of the programs that she helped start. But like Ask the Expert, she's also helped us carry out things like North Star, Coursera, and a new partnership that we're launching. And she's currently in talks with city colleges to help expand their offerings of GED and ESL courses across parent university sites. So more to come on the programs. But I view them as two, they work in concert together, but they're kind of two different work streams because We have parent training centers, we have parent university sites, and then you've got the programmatic work that's critical to those sites being in operation. We have our Community Action Council. So Carl Herdlich has been leading our CAC work for many years. We have 8 functioning Community Action Councils, and they support our district with strategic planning. We fund them to support different initiatives in their communities. And they really do help serve as a feedback loop for our district. So these are not CPS employees. They're leaders in their community, they're parents, they're leaders of organizations, but not CPS employees. And we convene them on a regular basis to help us be aware of what's happening in the community. And so really excited about building on that work in the year ahead, and helping resource it better, so that we're not only creating two-way communication, but we're also being responsive to our councils when they say that there's a real issue that's rising up and they need our support, really being able to step in and help them. And then we have our district initiatives work, and this you can imagine, as this past year alone, if you think about reopening as an example, we've been open for the better part of the last year, but that was a district initiative that started from the CEO's office saying, how are we going to do this? And then our team going out and meeting with parents, hosting focus groups, hosting roundtables, to make sure that whatever we do is responsive to our families. But much like reopening, we did 34 focus groups with parents, teachers, students, community members, to help us create the ideal profile for the candidate that they want to see as the next CEO. The city took that profile that was created by stakeholder input seriously when they when we had folks applying to be our next CEO. I do believe that like that one, there are many other initiatives that come out of CPS central office that we say we need to vet this by people, we need to vet this by parents. And so we help get that work out into the community and then create that feedback loop so that we're being responsive to the voices of our partners and our parents. All right, I'm gonna keep moving, Bede, if you want me to, and then okay, perfect. So the elevated framework, I'll be brief on this one, and we can drop the URL in the chat for folks. But in 2019, when I first started, I was asked, my first week on the job, was asked by a board member how we define engagement as a district. And, the answer that was given didn't resonate with the board member. And essentially the answer that was given was we react to things as they come, and we'll build it once we know what we're going up against, or once we know what the request is. And so what we did, working with the prior chief and with various other stakeholders, we partnered with Elevated Chicago, which is a third-party organization. They're funded by the Chicago Community Trust, to help our team think about what would it look like for us to have a clear framework for defining, for engaging with stakeholders. So the elevated framework has been a fantastic tool that we use throughout when we're making policies, when we're reviewing policies, when we're taking different initiatives out into the community. And so essentially what it fosters is two critical things. It's one, ensuring that the district is thinking about the people that are most impacted and putting them at the top of the list of who we need to engage with, and then identifying different stakeholder groups that would be impacted, and then moving them through what I call a ladder of engagement, right? Where it's access to information, so we will keep you informed, providing space for people to give you input, so consultation, then saying, it's not enough for me to say, I want to hear from you. It's I want to hear from you, and then to what end, right? How do you know that I heard what you said? And so then it's involving the feedback that you heard and applying it to your work wherever possible. And then ultimately the goal is to collaborate with parents, with partners, with principals, with teachers. And that's a really tough one, because I think it's one, a culture shift and a mind shift, but also when you think about this work, it's anyone that's done engagement work or organizing work knows that real authentic collaboration with partners and with stakeholders takes a lot of work because it requires trust. And I think if we're able to do the first three, inform, consult, involve, over and over and over and over and over again, you start to build trust so that then people actually want to collaborate with you. And so I'll go through the next set of slides that kind of talk a little bit about, before that, this sheet that you see here, it's a quick matrix of like when I first started and we wrote out the elevated framework, I had every single chief give me 2 priorities that they were working on. And as they wrote out their priorities, what were they going to do to think about those that are most impacted by their priority? And then what are you going to do to engage them? What are you going to do to keep people informed? How are you going to seek people's input and then acknowledge their thoughts? And then how are you going to work to ensure that you're not only taking their thoughts, but incorporating into your planning, ultimately with the goal to collaborate with people to help co-formulate solutions. And so every single day I sat down with everyone, presented this to everyone, and then collected these. And then we had one-on-one consultations with each chief. And I think that when I get to the results of what we saw last year, a lot of it was because we were really intentional from the beginning about how are we going to engage with our stakeholders, our parents, our students, our staff members. And so some of these are some clear examples. So level 1, we will keep you informed. What does it look like to keep people informed? And the FACE team really helped co-create a lot of these based on feedback from parents. But you've got communication, right? Emails, phone calls, texts, social media, letters, school level communications. And then you got public engagements. So think about these as town halls, one-on-one meetings. As an organizer, I love one-on-ones because you're able to meet people where they're at and really get to know them and what they care about. And it kind of helped tear down some of the walls that we kind of always hold up when it's a larger group setting. And then group meetings. From there, seeking consultation, what does it look like for us to solicit people's feedback? And we came up with different forms, right? There's paper and online surveys, attending town halls and public meetings and gathering feedback. So at the end of my presentation, saying, what do you think? And then having a smart note catcher capture everything. And really, I created this before the pandemic, but in the pandemic, there were so many other options that became available for collecting people's feedback, Jamboard and different, technical solutions that were created because feedback is such a critical part of policymaking. And so a lot of people kind of started to create tools that help districts, but also governments solicit feedback from stakeholders. And then involving, so it's not just, I heard what you said, it's I heard what you said, and here's what I'm doing about it. So wherever possible, how do we ensure that families feel that their voice and perspective were taken into consideration when we were planning? And so it's that feedback loop, and then coming back to people afterward and saying, here's what we heard, and here's what we did based on what we heard. And then ultimately, the goal of collaborating and bringing stakeholders to the table and providing a real opportunity for partnership. I think that the way that we've rolled out programs this year is a great example of that, where parents had a seat at the table for the types of programs that they were going to want to see in the year ahead. From the beginning, we didn't go and curate the list and then come back and say, which ones do you want? And then, go and solicit. No, from the very beginning, we started with focus groups and then parents helping formulate what they actually wanted us to put together. And like that, there are a lot of other opportunities, I think, in the year ahead for us to better collaborate with families and stakeholders around key decisions. So how do we use this and what do we do? So this past summer, we re-engaged a lot of stakeholders and over 40,000 families were engaged this summer. We distributed over 28,000 backpacks and flyers and yard signs. And a lot of this work was co-driven and co-designed by partners in the community. So the community action councils served a critical role with helping us set up summer events our faith-based team had a group of safe haven partners that were supporting with canvassing. So those flyers that were distributed weren't just distributed in downtown, they were distributed in key parts of the city where there were information gaps. And it wasn't just a back to school flyer. It was, vaccination hesitancy flyers. It was flyers that really help families get connected to critical resources. And then yard signs were something that came about meetings where people said, I don't know that the first day of school is August 30th. You need to do a better job at helping put things out there. So it was us trying to be responsive to what we were hearing from folks. And I think the work that we were able to do in the span of a month, 40 back to school events across the city, 10 hosted by us through bashes, is no small feat, but that takes a lot of work and a lot of partnership with the right people. And from our end, it's not just face. We've done, I think, what I've tried to do as I stepped into this role is making sure that every single department, everyone that you see listed here, was participating in these events, because it is our students. And so happy to report out that every single office from central office came to one or more bashes to volunteer, to meet directly with parents, to pass out backpacks, to make cotton candy in the cotton candy machines. Every single office was represented, and I think it helps people feel connected to the work as well. Our team held over 32 focus groups between June and July for students who were medically fragile, and as we were getting ready to stand up virtual academy, but also we held an additional 30 focus groups for identifying the next CEO. We held town halls this summer, again, going back to the framework. You can start to see the framework kind of being enacted, right? Town halls to inform people, but also solicit their feedback. Focus groups to solicit feedback and then incorporate that in our planning for what it is that we're going to do. And overall, last fiscal year, we engaged with over 150,000 CPS parents, community members, teachers through these town halls, through our workshops, through ARA meetings. And really it helps us connect district leadership to families so that we're being responsive to the needs of our community, of our stakeholders. I've already mentioned this, but we partner with more than 30 faith-based institutions to pass out flyers across the city. Faith-based leaders and partners canvas stops, and we were able to get out to the churches to promote back to school and vaccination events. So with that, I think that is it for my slides. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll turn it back to Bere.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a lot of really good information. So I'm going to give parents a few minutes to kind of soak that in. And then guys, please put your questions on the chat as you see them, as those things pop up in your head. As a parent, all you guys know, I talk about my munchkin, who's not that munchkin anymore every time we're in these sessions. So as a parent, I think one of the questions I think a lot of the parents have, you talked about the elevated framework and how we're using it as a district, right? Central office and people downtown or at Garfield Park. How do you think this can be used at the school level, right? Knowing that we have LSCs, we have PACs, we have bags, we have all sorts of different parent groups. So how can our parents use that or try to utilize it to support their schools?
I mean, that's the dream, right? Is that schools are using it. We've put it in their principal toolkit this past summer for reopening and re-engaging families. My hope is to offer more consistent trainings and webinars for educators and for school leaders. And then also being more intentional with our network chiefs. But absolutely, I would love nothing more than for parents to go through, and actually I think we're planning something separate down the line for next year, but to have a parent leadership fellowship that goes through principles of organizing, but also really leans on the elevated framework so that families are empowered to help make these things happen at the local school level.
For sure. Totally understand that. Yeah. One of the other things I know you mentioned through the elevated framework, right, is building that partnership and that trust, right? And I know a lot of parents had mentioned, we have brand new principals, how do we do it? So as the chief of family and community engagement, what do you think would be like the first thing or the first recommendation you would give for those folks, and also for parents who are joining an LSC, who are joining a PAC or a BAC, to like get the work going and switch that mindset to trusting, the bodies that are working within the school?
Yeah. I mean, that trust is so foundational to this work. And I before I came to CPS, I was on the opposite side. I actually was on the advocacy side, and there was a lot of mistrust. And I think part of what helps is making yourself available, recognizing that you're on the same team, right? Like people who work at CPS, majority of us who work at CPS are in this work because we genuinely care about kids and because we want our communities to thrive. We want, we want to see CPS successes everywhere. I think parents, I have yet to meet a parent who does not want what is best for their child, right? In my years of organizing and engagement work, I've yet to meet a parent who does not want what's best for their kid. And so with those two things in mind, if a school leader wants what's best for their school community and a parent wants what's best for their child, and there's a disagreement somewhere, then being able to remember that we all want what's best for kids, I think is a good foundation. Now, mind you, sometimes there are bad actors on both sides, right? Like sometimes that is the case. And when that is the case, like that's why there are different ways to escalate things and, support one another. But I do think that going into meetings, and I've done this myself before I started working in engagement, I was working with at-risk youth, kids who were in gangs, kids who were incarcerated. And there's a way to approach a difficult situation in an empathetic way and to seek understanding and not judgment. And I think sometimes that's hard, right? We're human and we get mad. And, if someone said something to my daughter, I'd be fuming. But that being said, we're also, you don't know what's going on the other side. That's why I always tell people, like, you don't know what's going on in someone's home situation, in someone's work day. If I spilled my coffee first thing in the morning, like, and so understanding that at the end of the day, like, one, we all want what's best for kids. Two, we're real people. We're not robots. Like, we go back to our families, we go back to our homes, to our dogs, to our cats, you name it. And so understanding that, like, you're dealing with a real person, I think helps sometimes. But I also think, empathy is such it's a buzzword these days, but it's so critical to leadership and to navigating tough conversations. Because if you can empathize with someone or try to empathize with someone and understand, why they're feeling the way they're feeling and validate it more than anything, then I think it sets the right condition for a meaningful conversation.
No, for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up, that we're all humans. I know sharing for parents, sharing your story, right? I think it's sometimes important. As many of you, as I see the list of who's here, many of you keep coming back to this session. So you already know all my stories. So I feel like we're all old friends and my munchkin, right? So I think it brings a level of community, right? Something that's really important for our department, building that community with us who are in this session, right? And then when you leave and come back and bring more people to continue to build in that community and in that trust, that you guys know you can send me an email and I'll get back to you, right? Like as fast as I can. So I think for you guys at the school level, many of you are parent leaders in your schools. So doing that same work, right? Because I know you guys are outside when the kids are getting in the morning and outside when the kids are getting out. So taking that opportunity to talk to your parents in your community and really finding out, right? Like what's the need? What do they need? And how can we help together as a community? Because one person can't do it all. Remember that, guys, right? We're always like, the principal said, right? Or this happened. Like this is everybody's work. So if we really, work together, we can really make things happen. Let me see. I have something in the chat. I don't have my glasses, so it's going to take me a minute. Give me 1 minute. Oh, Okay, that's a good question. So, Ron is a former CPS student and works with our schools. How can he go around sharing this information with parents?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and we're always looking for partners to help support, amplify this work. I think one, Berenice is a great resource, but I think she usually uploads a lot of this information to the FACE channel on YouTube, and then we're always available, right? Every single FACE specialist. So, Ron, if you're working in a specific community, or if you're citywide, that we can connect you with the right folks internally on our end to help equip you with the information that you'll need to help bring these resources to the schools that you partner with.
Yeah, and just to add to what Adriana is saying, the face specialists, they're like a great resource at like your community level, right? Because there's 13 of them, they know their area. So if there's a specific need for your community, reaching out to those folks. And you can find that information on the CPS website under face, and you can see it by network, and they'll have their names and their emails. And those are folks who really know their community, who can support and help and bring resources to your community, to your school at the school level. I know for the packs and the bags, sometimes, we need a speaker because something happened at the school, right? SEL, and we need some resources for those parents. So reaching out to those folks is definitely a useful thing. So on the west side, south side, Ron, if you have my email, you can send me an email and I can try to connect you with someone on the west side and the south side. Adrian, another question. I know you mentioned community action consoles. And can you talk a little bit about that? Like, do they exist all over the city? How do they work? How can our parents get involved in those?
So they don't exist all over the city. We have 8 of them that are functioning at right now. My hope is to expand that work. Really, community action councils stemmed in the early mid 2000s, and it was in part as a result of the school closures that took place, and wanting to remedy partnerships in the community and rebuild and regain people's trust. They are independent of CPS, but I think we have our 8 community action councils that we recognize, but there are a lot of other partners that are in communities doing work. Right? I know Pilsen has the Pilsen Education Task Force. Northwest Side has the Education Committee that they run, and so I know that there are different similar committees that exist. My hope is to take stock of that in the year ahead, and really be thoughtful and intentional around expanding, how we identify a community action council, so that we have a real understanding of what are all the groups that are meeting, that have an education component to their work and are meeting on a regular frequency. And how do we get plugged into that, right? It's not creating new systems, but rather getting plugged into things that already exist and are already working for people. But we have 8 of them, mainly on the south and on the west side.
Great. So parents, get involved in your community, find out, because there's definitely a lot of things also like on the north side of community organizations and things that are happening in those communities. So definitely reach out to your face manager because they'll let you know. They're the ones in the know. Another question I think that parents usually have when it comes to engagement, we mentioned everything we've been doing, and now that we're back in school, right? Like how are we keeping our parents informed of what's happening? There's tons of things going on in the district and in the school. How are we as Chicago Public Schools trying to keep our parents informed and involved?
Yeah, I think going back to that slide that I had of inform, I know that email doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for me. I have not been able to get it manageable. But our department's really stepped up to help. Going back to those that are most impacted right now, we're helping navigate the transportation issue. That's a national issue. There's a shortage of bus drivers across the country. Chicago is not exempt to that. And a lot of families have been impacted by transportation access. And so our team has been, there's letters that went out to families, there's emails that have gone out to families. I know it's come up in our board meeting, but if you're a family that doesn't read your email, doesn't check the mail. Maybe you moved, and so the mail went to the wrong house, and you don't have time to sit down and watch a 3-hour board meeting. Our team has been proactively calling those families that are impacted, just to make sure that we're able to pull out the full suite. Like, what does it mean to inform someone, and what are the methods that we can use to inform them of programs, of initiatives, right? And so we're doing something very similar with COVID testing, and making sure that we're increasing the number of families that opt into it. Email isn't cutting it, and so what are the other things that we have at our disposal that can help increase information getting out to families and caregivers?
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned that, I know I mentioned this almost in every session, right? If we don't have the correct contact information, we can't get a hold of you, parents. So that's really important. If you moved, you changed your number, to go to your school and provide that information, because that's the information we get, right? To be able to call you or send you an email or a text if you sign up for those things, to really be able to disseminate that information. And I think the other good thing that you can look into is our website. It has tons of information. I know there's some folks this week who contacted us about internet. So Chicago Connected information is still up there. You can see if you qualify and then get hooked up for free internet if you qualify. So make sure that you as a parents who are here today and are learning this information to go back to your schools and share that information, right? Or share the link of the video that we're going to put up, just so parents know what we have, right? And I know we're all very busy, but maybe when you have some free time, browse the CPS website. I think there's a lot of really good information. One thing that we worked on this past year, Adrian, I think if you remember, is the Dreaming Together Toolkit, which is an amazing tool that you guys as parents leaders can use at your schools when you're doing your meetings, when you're trying to have an initiative in your school. It's literally like a step-by-step of how to conduct some of these things, from like your idea and how do you work through that idea and how do you bring people into the table. So it's amazing. Thanks, I'm putting that up. So you guys, even if you're not a parent leader and you have an idea and you want to bring it to your school, I think this would be like a great first step for you guys to utilize. So check out the CPS website at all times, because we continuously have things. The calendar is another great way. All of our sessions are up there. And then you'll also see other community partners that we have who are also doing workshops or offering programs to parents. That's all on the CPS calendar. So you guys can go there and find all that information, how to RSVP or who to call. I know some of you guys heard in the news about our Coursera program, and I know our hotline was just buzzing this week because parents were calling and trying to figure out, how do I sign up for it? So again, send me an email if you have questions. It's on the CPS website of all this amazing information through our partnership with the city, Chicago Public Schools, and offering really, like Adriana said, robust programming for you guys, so that not only programs where you can come and learn, right, but you can also get certified in different things. And even with city colleges, something we're putting together, right? If for some reason you didn't finish high school, let's get our GED, right? Or you do have, you came from another country and you do have all the certifications, but you don't speak English. We have ESL classes, like come and let's learn together so we can advance. Because this is, like Adriana said, it's about the kids, but we also want to promote your own learning as adults through all these partnerships that we have. So making sure that we do that for you guys, and then you're looking out for that, sign up for a newsletter and having all that information. So any other questions from parents? I know I've been asking a lot of questions that were submitted ahead of time. I don't know if anybody who's joining us live has any questions for Adrian, just what the district is doing. How do we support maybe some of the work that you guys are trying to do at your school? So I'm going to give you a minute or so to think about it and put some of those questions in the chat for us. And then one of the other things I know we mentioned, and some people had questions, was for volunteers, right? Some of our parents are eager to come back in the building and support their schools again. Has the process changed a bit, or is it the same process? What do parents should be concerned about?
Same process, and all volunteer policies have been reinstated. And so I know I met with a group of parent mentors yesterday who are already in their schools supporting classrooms. And so we are the same process as before. If you're a level 1 volunteer, you do have to be fully vaccinated. And so just, being clear about that. But level 2 volunteers and all of that, it's still same process.
Fantastic. So parents obviously talk to your school, right, and see what the need is. If they're taking volunteers to come in, but definitely doing that. I know we have we have a question in the chat from Andrea, and I'll read it in Spanish and then switch it to English. So her question is, ¿qué podemos hacer para escoger un director en una escuela? So what do we do to select a principal at the school level?
Yeah, so you would have to be on the local school council, and in partnership with the network chief for that area, you would likely get a list of resumes of potential candidates. Many schools actually do create their ideal profile of what type of leader they want to see, and then there's an entire local school council process that we have cemented for how to select your principal. Obviously, people different LSCs have different methods, but ultimately what it comes down to is, choosing the type of candidate you're looking for, working as a school community to define that. ¿Cuál es el proceso?
So I think, Andrea, what's the process to get on the LSC, or what's the process that the LSC is using? Two different questions. So if you can clarify, that would be awesome. Anita, I know you put a question too. So there's a process that principals need to get on the list to be a principal, right? And there's a process that the state and Chicago Public Schools does for that process to happen. And then that's when the LSC comes on board if the school is in need of a principal, right? And they go through this whole process. They go through a training through our LSC office to do that, right? And then they also involve you guys. A lot of the LSCs host different meetings to kind of brief the school, brief the parents, and get feedback. So it's also important for you guys to go to the LSC meetings at your school or be in the lookout for those notes that are sent out. Also, Andrea, if you're part of the LSC, send me an email and I can connect you with your facilitator.
Yes.
So those are the people that help you, and we can go from there. That way you get the precise information that you need, because I don't want to give you bad info.
And the support, because we've helped different local school councils. We've offered them additional training as they're going through the principal selection process. So really happy to help support there.
Okay, no te preocupes, Andrea. So send me that info. And Anita, I don't know if your question is when can parents start going to the school to volunteer? And I think if that is your question, it's correct me if I'm wrong, Adrian. I think that's up to the discretion of the principal and the needs of the school.
Yeah, it's definitely up to the needs of the school, but we have, like I said earlier, but the volunteer policy has been reinstated effective at the start of the school year. And so if the school has a need for volunteers and you were a volunteer in the past and you've gone to your principal and said, hey, I want to volunteer again this year, and they said yes or no, it is up to discretion if there's a need. And if there's a need and you've supported in the past, I'm sure it should be fairly simple to get reinstated as a CPS volunteer.
Yeah, and just to add to the volunteer process, if you were a volunteer last year, the year before COVID, right, hit, and you're already in the system, if you're trying to apply again, sometimes it says you can't create an account because you're already in the system. So it's just going back to your school and saying, hey, I'm already in the system, I want to volunteer, and then re-show your ID, right, so they know it's you, and then they can check out the system and make sure that it's updated for the school year. Because I know a lot of parents had that issue. We're getting some calls like, it's not letting me create an account. So just know that. And we're talking about, the other questions is about bag and pack.
Mhm.
So I think it says, quiero saber qué está pasando con los grupos de back y pack, porque aún en las escuelas donde van mis hijos, aún no han llamado una reunión.
Yeah. So estamos en ese proceso. Sorry.
Yeah,
You can
English, English.
do it in English. Um, we're in the process right now of hosting PAC meetings. And so for back, I can follow up with Olse and ask them where they're at in terms of their planning and if they're going to do things in person or how they're pivoting. But for PAC, we are starting that process, and you should be getting a notice if you've been active on the PAC before. Where our deadline actually for Title I compliance is coming up. And so you should be getting an invitation to that meeting soon.
Yeah, and just so you know, I know principals are still trying to figure out, right? Like how are we hosting these meetings, right? Like the logistics of it. Some schools get a lot of parents, which is great to come in to these meetings. Obviously, they're still trying to figure out like where do we host them where there's enough space where everybody is still safe, right? So as a parent and a CPS person who used to support the PAGs, like be patient. They will be sending those things out. But also you guys can call your school. I think this is what Adrian was talking about, right? Like those communicating with your school, calling the main office and just asking, right? Or going to the website and seeing if there's nothing up there. A lot of your schools usually have at the elementary school level, and some high schools started having this like a parent support person in the building. So figuring out who that is. So, and this person, that's like your to-go person. They know what's happening. So you can definitely figure out when there's meetings, if there's something else that's going on the school. So making sure that those things are being disseminated or being given to the parents. Okay. I don't know if there's any more questions. I'll give you guys another minute to type those in. But in the meantime, Adrian, I know our time is coming to a close. If you can think of all the stuff that we talked about today, what would be one of the most important things that you want parents to take away from the information you provided today?
I think three key things. It's one, we need you. We're on the same team. And we need your thoughts, your perspective, your feedback, your partnership. So that's like super critical. Like we cannot do this work as a district, as a department, without parents and partners in the community. So just want to be very clear about that. Two, we're also learning as we go. I think it's really important for people to know in engagement in this work, things will. We are always putting our best foot forward. I can speak for myself, and I can speak for the team. Are always putting our best foot forward to be responsive to families, to help them solve problems that arise for them. But we're also human. I said this earlier, and so I think it's important to remember that. And then three, your involvement is super important during this time, and there are so many ways to be involved. I always tell people I'm an involved parent, even though I work long hours. So I'm not the parent who's going to show up and do reading time at 9 a.m. at my daughter's preschool, because I'm in my third meeting by 9 a.m. But I am the parent that does care and pulls the teacher aside to say, hey, how are you doing? How are things going for you? This has been a year unlike any other. And so parents, there are different ways to be involved. And I think, the way I think about my job is really helping understand what are those different ways to be involved. And then how do we create spaces for people to kind of like community service, right? Like how do you create spaces where people actually find meaning in their involvement? Whether that's running for local school council, being on a PAC, being on a BAC. Honestly, for me, those three things, if I were not a CPS employee, would feel really daunting to do. Like I'd be like, all right, there's a ton of hours that you got to contribute to it. Like, what are other ways? And does that make me a bad parent for not having the time? No, right? And so I think helping us think about what are different ways parents can be involved in that maybe we're not thinking about. And then two, helping encourage other parents to also be involved however they can be. And so those are my three things. I think, we need you. We're all people, so like empathy both ways. And then helping us think about unique ways to create spaces for parents to be involved that are inclusive, right?
For sure. No, thank you, Adrian, for that. And I know there's a couple more questions on the chat, but what I'm going to do for the people on the chat asking Pat questions, I'm putting the email for Norma Soledon, who's our Title I manager. So all those questions can go straight to her because I don't want to give you guys wrong information because I'm not sure myself since I'm no longer a phase manager. So I'm out of the loop a little bit on that. So email Norma, or if you know who your phase manager are, Lily, I know you're in Network 4, so just email me and then I'll try to hook you up.
Someone's
The rest
starting
of,
here soon.
yeah, so definitely. And and we're gonna bring it to a close. I know it's 5 o'clock. So parents who are here, thank you so much for being engaged and sharing your questions and learning something new and asking your questions so that Adriana and I can like think a little bit hard and figure out things like how to best support you. And Adriana, thank you for coming. I know you're super busy, but thank you for joining us and giving parents like all this great information about what we're doing as a department and what else we're going to be doing as the year goes on, the academic school year this year. So thank you so much for joining us. And Sylvia, thank you so much. You're always great and doing the interpretation for our parents. So shout out to you. I know you're always hard at work or interpreting for our parents. So everybody, thank you so much. And I give you guys a good night and enjoy the rest of your night. Bye-bye, everybody.
Adios.